We all hate waiting, but what we're going to learn today is that God's timetable is clearly not most of the time what we like, but his timetable is always perfect. We're going to learn that today from a man by the name of Simeon. All right, good morning. Today I want to encourage you with this thought. Encouraging truth number 74 says, when God is ready, he will show up. We need to remember that. God's timetable is nothing like ours. We're going to be reminded of that today by a man by the name of Simeon and a woman by the name of Anna. So let's start with Simeon. We actually don't know much about him except the fact that he was waiting all of his life for the birth of Jesus. Most people believe that he was older because he speaks of dying and he's going to see Jesus before he dies. We don't really know much about him except this. Look at Luke 2:25. Now there was a man in Jerusalem named Simeon who was righteous and devout. He was waiting, we hate that word, he was waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. In other words, Simeon knew his scriptures. He knew about the promised Messiah that would be the consolation of Israel. And he also knew that he would not die without actually seeing him. He believed that that's what God had told him. We see that in Luke 2:26. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not die before he had seen the Lord's Christ. God had told Simeon that he would never die until the Messiah would show up on the earth. But it was years and years and years. And I often wonder if he would go to the temple and just wonder, is today the day? Is today the day the Messiah is going to show up? I wonder if he woke up with hopeful expectations every morning. But it's just a reminder that he, like us, we have to wait. That's just part of life. The story of Simeon is actually a reminder to all of us who are waiting for things that, honestly, for some of you, you've been praying about for years. Maybe you're waiting for something to change in your marriage. Maybe you're waiting to feel better from your sickness. Maybe you're waiting for that job, and you're still waiting, and you're still waiting, and you're still waiting. I have a list of things I'm still waiting for, and I've been praying for them for years. But we need to learn from Simeon. And what Simeon did that we need to learn from is never, ever give up. Never give up praying. Never give up hoping. If Simeon is an old man at this particular time, that just means he's been waiting a long time for Jesus to show up on this earth. But here's what I learned from him. Simeon just woke up every morning. He woke up, walked to the temple, did his job, looked around, looked to see if the Holy Spirit was going to show him anything, show him the promised Messiah. And when the day was over, Simeon would walk back home and then go to sleep and start back the next morning with the process all over again. The lesson that we can learn is that waiting is a big part of life. Someone once wrote this: it may increase your patience to realize that every minute you have is another gift from God. The minute you are living through right now is a gift from God. So when God tells you to wait for him, he is perfectly within his rights. He is asking you to give back to him what he has already given to you. I think that's a really great point. But I think as we grow in our faith and we start really understanding that God is in control of our life and in our circumstances, then we can be like Simeon and wake up each day with peace, knowing when God is ready to do something, he will. When I taught this about Simeon many, many years ago, I came across something that I said at the time. Rob and I had gone for a walk, and I was really discouraged and frustrated that things weren't happening fast enough. And I feel like, nothing's ever going to happen the way we want it to and as soon as we need it to. But I stopped and I said, but you know what, Rob? You know what I learned from Simeon? Is that he just woke up every morning and he got out of bed and he did the same thing he always did. And then at the right time, God's time, then that's when God showed up and gave Simeon exactly what he promised. And for some reason, Simeon just gives me hope to just keep going. Keep doing the same thing you're doing every day. If God doesn't show up today, maybe it'll be tomorrow. Maybe it'll be a year from now. But just day by day by day, wake up, show up, and see what God does for that day. Dr. Jim Wilson says this: we are only impatient if we think time belongs to us. But when we know it belongs to God, we have the capacity to be patient. Are you willing to trust in Him when you're living in the middle of the story, or do you want to fast forward to the end? Do you want to skip the struggle to get to the resolution? Or even in the struggle, are you content to trust God, letting the unseen faith anchor you during troubled times? I don't know. I think for most of us, me included, sometimes I want to fast forward. Sometimes I want to fast forward to the end because I do not like the struggle. But then I realized that I would miss so much out of life because it was in the middle of my struggle. Those are the times that I got to know God best. Those are the times that my faith grew the most. Those are the times I learned that God was really, really trustworthy. And Simeon trusted God to do what he promised he would do. So one day, this happens. Luke 2:27. It starts out and says, guided by the Spirit. Simeon was guided by the Spirit. See, as followers of Jesus, we have the Holy Spirit living within us, and He guides us too. Which means we need to be staying close to Him. We need to be listening to Him. We need to be not clogging up our lines with sin so we can't hear Him. We need to listen for His still small voice. So guided by the Holy Spirit, look what happens. He entered the temple complex. Now I want to show you a couple pictures. If you ever go to Jerusalem, you need to go to the southern steps on the Temple Mount. These pictures here, here's one that was excavated in 1968. These are the same steps that Jesus walked on. These are the same steps that Mary and Joseph would have brought baby Jesus up when Simeon would see him. Verse 27, guided by the Spirit, he entered the temple complex up those stairs. When the parents brought in the child Jesus to perform him what was customary under the law, then he, Simeon, took him, Jesus, into his arms and blessed God. And now, Lord, you're releasing your bondservant to depart in peace, according to your word, for my eyes have seen your salvation. You have prepared it in the presence of all peoples, light for revelation to the Gentiles and glory to your people Israel. What Simeon teaches us is that God's timing is not our timing, but God's timing is always the perfect timing. Simeon finally, after all of these years, the Holy Spirit leads him to the temple on the exact day, the exact time, and he sees Mary and Joseph, and it's revealed to him that this is the Messiah. And Simeon is overwhelmed with joy. So many people in the Bible had to learn to wait. When Moses went to get the Israelites out of Egypt, he just thought he'd go in, tell Pharaoh, hey, let my people go, and that would be what would happen. But it didn't happen that way. He had to wait. He was embarrassed. He was put through painful situations. He had to watch 10 plagues happen without anything changing. And yet when Pharaoh did let them go, Moses is standing at the Red Sea. The Egyptians are on their tail, trying to kill them. The Red Sea is in front of them. There's nowhere to go. And look at what Exodus 14:13 says. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring for you when? Today. Today is the day that you're going to see the deliverance of the Lord. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. His whole point was verse 14, the Lord will fight for you, you need to only be still. See, part of waiting is literally just recognizing what battles we're facing and then understanding God is going to fight those battles for me. So I am going to wait until God comes through and does what he needs to do. But here's the key. In due time. In due time. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in God's time, in due time. So until then, we can just rest in peace and know that God is doing something. I think that's one of the greatest parts for me of being a Christian, a follower of Jesus, is this knowledge that God is my Father, I am His child, that God controls everything. He can change something, He can make something happen, He can do whatever. And even better than that, I know that even when bad things happen, that God promises that He's working even the bad things for good. He does what needs to be done in the fullness of time. Dr. Jim Wilson says this: one of the reasons we find it difficult to slow down is that we have not become convinced of the need for things to occur in the fullness of time. We feel there's so much to accomplish and so few years in which to do it all that we've become addicted to instant everything. Now there's instant food at drive-through windows, instant cash from an ATM, instant credit from all manner of stores, and instant information available online. We have lost the ability to let life unfold in its own time. The scriptural record, however, gives us another way to think about this. How long did Abraham and Sarah wait for the arrival of their promised heir, Isaac? God first revealed to Abraham that he would be the father of many nations when He called him to leave his country and go to the land God would show him. Abraham was 75 years old. 15 years later, when Abraham was 90, God renewed His promise. And then 10 years later, at the age of 100, Abraham and Sarah finally had their son. That's a total of 25 years before the fullness of time. How long did the Israelites wander through the desert after leaving Egypt on their way to the Promised Land? 40 long years. How long did Jesus pray in the Garden of Gethsemane? Probably hours. Yet hours that moved as slowly as a lifetime. But not until He was on the cross, in the fullness of time, could He say, "It is finished." After the horror and grief of Jesus' death, how long did Mary and the disciples wait in pain? 3 days. But days that lasted an eternity, as anyone knows who has lost a loved one. How long did they wait for the coming of the Holy Spirit? Remember, Jesus had said to them, "I send the promise of my Father on you, but stay in Jerusalem until you have been clothed with power from on high." How long did they wait for this mystery to occur? 50 long days. How long has the church waited for Christ to come again? Although many have tried to define the actual moment at which it will happen, we continue to wait. We have waited more than 2,000 years, and will continue to wait until the fullness of time. Which brings us to the man of the hour today, Simeon. Think of old Simeon, the priest of the temple, who waited his whole life to see the promised Messiah. God had told him long before that he would not die until he had seen the Christ. Then when Mary and Joseph brought Jesus into the temple to be blessed, Simeon lifted him up and said, "Lord, now let your servant depart in peace according to your word, for my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared for all the world to see, a light to lighten the Gentiles and the hope of your people, Israel." Simeon shows us that he never gave up on what God promised him. And even though each day passed and each day got closer to him getting older and older and older, maybe for him he felt like his little death clock was ticking down to nothing, but he also trusted God. He believed that God would be faithful with what he was told. So Simeon sees Jesus, the Holy Spirit opens his eyes to see the baby. Out of all the babies that are there that day, a baby that is with this poor young couple, Simeon realizes this is the long-awaited Messiah. Verse 33 says, "And his father and mother were amazed at the things which were being said about him." That verse shocks me. Why would Mary and Joseph be amazed? Like the angel Gabriel showed up to Mary, told her exactly what would happen. Mary gets pregnant by being overshadowed by the Holy Spirit. Jesus is born in Bethlehem, which was the prophesied place. It was prophesied hundreds of years before it happened. Everything about the birth of Jesus was miraculous and pointed to the promised Messiah. But maybe what Simeon was saying and what Mary and Joseph were hearing was beyond the scope of what they could even comprehend. Verse 32, "A light for revelation to the Gentiles and glory to your people, Israel." Maybe they never realized that the birth of Jesus would affect Gentiles worldwide for all time. Maybe this was news to them. Maybe they never understood the whole picture. Verse 34, and Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and for a sign to be opposed, and a sword will pierce even your own soul, to the end that thoughts from many hearts may be revealed. Simeon wanted Mary and Joseph to know that the birth of their son would come turmoil for his people, the Jews, and he wanted to give Mary a heads up what they were about ready to live through, and it would not be easy. Then we meet Anna, verse 36, and there was a prophetess Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years, and she had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage. And then as a widow to the age of 84, she never left the temple, serving night and day with fasting and prayers. Anna gives me hope, because getting older just sometimes feels weird. But here we see Anna at 84 years old, and she loves God more at the end of her life than she did at the beginning. And somehow that encourages me that can happen to all of us if we keep God always in the forefront of our life. Anna shows up, and God reveals to her also who this baby is. And this is what happens. At verse 38, at that very moment she came up and began giving thanks to God and continued to speak to him, to all those who were looking for the redemption of Jerusalem. For Mary and Joseph, this must have been a great moment. This must have been a great moment for Simeon and Anna. And this great moment happened because Simeon and Anna just faithfully woke up every morning, looking, hoping, waiting. And when God was ready, when the time was right, in due time, they were able to see what God promised them. So the lesson for us today is this: wake up, show up, love Jesus, trust him daily, because, encouraging truth number 74, when God is ready, he will show up. Have a really good day.